Hello and welcome back. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the big top nice secret game, Project Caesar. So, without further ado, or what we're going to be talking about is going to be some military stuff that I'm actually super excited about. Mainly logistics, but some other stuff as well. Let's get into it. Hello everyone to another Tinto Talks. Hello everyone to another Tinto Talks. Hello everyone to another Tinto Talks. Is that grammatical? I feel like it is, but it just looks funny. Okay. The Happy Wednesday. This is what we're here for. The Happy Wednesday to you all. The day of the week where we discuss our super secret game with codename Project Caesar. This week we will delve into the glorious world of logistics and sieges. You know the saying, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, which is the saying that makes everyone mad because the amateurs are like, tactics, and then the professionals are like, shh. Don't tell our secrets. Trade secrets. Alright. First off, leader assignment. First of all, yes. One thing we have added is what we refer to as commission time. If a character has been assigned to lead an army or navy, you cannot remove him from command before at least 12 months have passed. Is this an indication that we're not going to have female generals? Or just... Okay. This removes the teleport leader across the world exploit. Makes sense. It also makes it more of a choice on how to deploy your characters. I like this change. I don't like teleporting people. I especially don't like it because not only does it feel bad from a theming perspective, but if it feels bad to have really, really granular micro where you're supposed to teleport your leader for one battle, then teleport your leader for another battle, and the leader's just so good that you want to fight every battle with him or something like this, and I like this. Reinforcing regiments. While your levies do not reinforce, your regular regiments will attempt to reinforce if you have manpower and get access to the goods they require. This is probably an important caveat. So, being deep in enemy territory has, problems, which we're going to see more of as we talk into logistics, but this is an example of what we're going to see, where, some of the difficulties in moving around an army are now tied to the logistics, and we even see some Age of Revolution stuff where you can chase people down past zone of control, but that's maybe not a good idea because not having access to goods or food or this type of stuff. A regiment that is part of an army that is retreating in combat, loaded on a ship, or currently taking attrition losses will not be able to reinforce. This makes sense. A regiment can only reinforce in your owned locations and in a location owned by someone you are fighting in a war together with when that location is not currently occupied. Okay, this makes sense. But I guess you can't reinforce categorically if you are in foreign territory, which also to some degree makes sense. I think in theory you should be able to reinforce via baggage train, but it's not that big a deal. Not many soldiers, but 5 a month is enough here. Okay. Army movement. When people talk about logistics, it's usually intrinsically linked to the movement of armies, and the movement of armies in Project Teaser has some changes compared to what you might be used to. One thing that has taken inspiration from the Hearts of Iron series is the fact that when an army is moving, they will be slowly losing morale. I love that this incorporation. Also, I love that they're just Frankensteining a game together, where they're taking the features that they think are best from all the games, and kind of taking the best features and not fully incorporating all the features, because obviously that'd create a lag monstrosity. Although, to be fair, I have concerns regarding performance as it relates to this game as they tease more and more stuff, but it does make sense. This creates a natural flow of armies marching and resting, and not just marching across Europe and immediately joining a battle. The march has no impact at all. Yeah. Anyone who's ever, when you march, when you walk 20 miles in a day, you do not feel like fighting at the end of that day, you know what I mean? Although I suppose that the people in the army are probably in a little bit better shape. But if you do that several days in a row, forget about it. We have also added to the fact that an army is beyond a certain size will be marching slower, whereas an army, where size is based on the total frontage it is feeling. This is an interesting one where, in theory, you could have small armies that march faster. But I hope this doesn't create a situation where you're supposed to split apart your army in order to march them, and then over long distances, and then regroup them together before you fight. While you can attach units, this makes the attached units move slower, as military organization in the late medieval era was rather limited. In later ages, you get advances that reduce this penalty significantly, completely limiting, I assume that's supposed to be eliminating it in the Age of Revolutions. And speaking particularly about that age, we also have an advance that makes multiple corps combat more interesting, making them to march to the battle of the sound of the guns. This advance allows an army to quickly react if another army of ours is in an adjacent location, enters combat, and will quickly march and join that battle. That is an interesting one. March to the sound of the guns. I guess that's this unlock right here. This advance. We do see some interesting ones. Ignore zone of control in Napoleonic warfare is what we were talking about earlier, where it's pretty self-explanatory, but this does mean that you can dive in past the forts, to try and chase an army down to eliminate that army, but you are going to have to suffer the logistical penalties that go along with it, which I think makes sense. This granularity of having like the ability to execute these sorts of tactics, to me, is like a bit of fresh air coming off of mainly playing Victoria 3. Now, to be fair, I would prefer military, generally speaking, to be mostly hands-off, because I'm more interested in economics, which is why you don't see a lot of videos on military from me for Victoria 3. But Victoria 3 still requires a lot of micro. And probably more micro than it should, so that is a little bit unfortunate. When it's micro, where we're making a decision whether or not to dive out after the enemy army, knowing we're going to run out of food or something like this, I think that is that sounds like an interesting decision point, but maybe it's you just always make the same choice no matter what. But okay, let's continue on. Food and armies. Now that you're wondering, that is fine. That is fine, but can an army march on an empty stomach? Yes, that's entirely true. Each army has food it consumes each month, or else they will be deserting and dying. If you run out of food during a siege, you are basically forced to abandon the siege very quickly as your army evaporates. A standard infantry regiment can usually carry a few months of rations with them, but when they are gone, they are gone. That's true. Here's a new category of unit comes into place. One of the major auxiliary category is the logistics unit, which can carry far more food than any other type of unit. Okay, so we might be wanting to march around with these logistic type units. We can see they have requirements in terms of resources of metalworks, leather, copper, and tin. And maintenance requires, this is just to establish it, and then maintenance, paper, medicaments, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, metalworks and leather. Okay, makes sense. I assume that it's going to have virtually no combat, but we do see food storage. 6 is probably the thing that we're doing this for, but this allows for asymmetries to emerge, and I mean, if you play chess, one of the interesting things is you can have symmetrical pawn structures, where if white goes first and they have a symmetric pawn structure, it's generally very balanced, but white just has a slight advantage, and black tries to play solidly and just defends. But if the pawn structure is asymmetric, what ends up happening is one person will usually acquire an advantage on one side of the board and another on the other side of the board, and the game tends to be a lot more dynamic and gives a lot more fighting chances for black. Now, this is probably stretching the metaphor a little bit, but if you have certain types of, if you end up having a lot of logistics units, and your opponent does not have a lot of logistics units, you probably want to try and abuse the fact that they're going to run out of food before you do, and vice versa. So maybe we have types of situations where you end up not having a lot of logistics units, and so diving after the enemy maybe makes sense, because you're going to run out of food and you expect them to play competently, which is not exactly the AI. But the second one is maybe you could dive after them because you have so much food in your army and you don't have to worry about supply lines at all, just as it relates to this. But just kind of waiting things out and waiting on top of a mountain, also you can do that a lot better if you have more food, because if they have to eventually abandon the position before you do, you can afford to wait things out, and you can also afford to run away and just like kind of snake about and try and cut their supply lines while actively avoiding fighting. As long as you have access to more food than them, it gives an advantage to not engaging, which is an asymmetry, much like how in chess you can be strong on the king's side and weak on the queen's side, or vice versa, in which case you try and play the side you're strong at. And so the fact that we are going to have units that can be made up in different ways maybe allows for this type of strategic or tactical decision making. Well, I guess that'd be strategic, but anyways, so how do you get food for your armies then? Well, if they're stationed in your own locations, they will make food from local provincial supplies, so you'll sometimes have to be careful where you station your armies. This is interesting. If you get a bonus to population growth based on having an abundance of food, in theory you would want to station your armies not where you have most of your troops, and this also will force you to kind of think about where you station your armies, which of course makes sense, so as to not cause the local population to starve. We hate it when that happens. If you want to get food from your allies or countries you have military access with, you need to negotiate a treaty that allows you to take their supplies. Obviously, they won't like their food getting expensive, or maybe they will, because if their food gets expensive, it raises the price, makes the buildings more profitable. Still, we need to see still some more stuff regarding the economics of the game, but as I understand it, that is a potential thing. So maybe giving the ability for supplying someone's food for the purpose of making your industries more profitable, making your burgers more rich. Maybe this is a vibe, or maybe it just makes the peasants too mad because the goods they are consuming are now more expensive. Who knows? This is not always something every country will accept. Your subjects have no say in it, though. Get wrecked, idiots. As most types of subjects give this access implicitly. Alright, cool. Maybe we should have had more than a single Arug? I assume that is the one for giving food capacity. We see that of the 14 units in the army, we have one supply unit, and we have food for 8 months. So, okay. I'm wondering... This will take some playing around with, but I do think that the food and supply lines are something that I think were actually just like wildly important in historic warfare, and they largely get ignored through games, as does the entire notion of scouting and information gathering, and like allowing yourself to maneuver into a better position as the result of gathering better intelligence, or not just stumbling into a trap and actually knowing where the enemy is. Like just a really, really heavy fog of war game, which I don't think this is going to be, where like scouting is like a thing, is often overlooked in grand strategy games, as is food. So very excited to see some of this food stuff. While you're at war, you could steal food from enemy-occupied provinces. If you control the capital of the province, you could steal the food of the local population there to feed your armies. If your army is at a hostile location where you cannot get local food, you can try and trace access up to 2 locations away. Alright, fair enough. Through controlled locations to get the food. If you can't reach your own locations at that distance, then there are 2 ways to get food to your armies. First of all is a local supply depot, and I love this. Within range. First of all, if there is a supply depot within range. Why is my brain putting local? Like, my brain is like auto-inserted local, but they just say supply depot. Within that range, your army will draw food from it. A supply depot can be created by any army, and you can deposit your food until it's at its maximum storage capabilities, and any army within range can withdraw from it. Okay. So this is... I think that this is really important. You can deposit food. Any army can withdraw from it. And so this makes it so fighting over supply depots is maybe going to be a bit of a thing. And historically speaking, it was a thing. And so, I mean, I think of Romance of the Three Kingdoms like era where Cao Cao fights Yuan Shao, and one of their big important battles is over a supply depot, because if one side runs out of food and the other has plenty of food, suddenly the options are really constricted for the side that doesn't have food, where they need to fight or they need to retreat, and they cannot wait. And so I think that the fact that you can use enemy storage depots definitely makes sense, and I'm excited to see it. Any army can gather food from their homeland and deposit it into the depot if there's enough space. There are also advances for increasing the capacity of your depots as well. You also have capacity for the navies to provide logistical support as well. I do love it when there is importance given to navies. I think that like logistics in Victoria 3 is just like, I still think you don't even really get much of a balance from just being completely encircled and having no access to any types of goods, which is just insane. But there are 2 unit abilities. Well, it's maybe not super insane because the military is supposed to be hands-off, but, you know. There are 2 unit abilities that can be done for them, gathering food and distributing food. Gather food will take food from an adjacent province you own, and your fleet can store food depending on the food carrying capacity of the ships, which maybe makes it so that you want to have logistical boats as well as fighting boats. Distributing food allows the Navy to act like a floating supply depot that your armies can get food from. Very cool. Also makes it so that you can have you could support larger military campaigns via boat if you have a really, really big navy, which makes sense. While we do understand that not every player may enjoy caring as much about logistics, these are the peasants that they referred to at the start of the game, the amateurs, right? Yeah, where is this? Amateurs talk tactics. Yeah, more shade. Okay. For those, you can assign logistic objectives to supporting armies and navies, and they will solve it for your main armies. Very, very, very much so. Love the fact that for everything that seems hyper granular, there does seem to be an assurance that there will be some sort of automation that you could do for it. So yeah, if you don't want to execute the logistics yourself, then you just have to assign the armies, which I think is probably going to be the way you want to do it, where you have to be cognizant of the fact that you have to create these supporting armies and navies, and that the amount of supporting armies and navies you have will inform the types of actions you can take, but that once you assign them, you don't actually have to micro it. You can also steal food from your enemy in battle when they are defeated, as a defeated army cannot protect their entire baggage train as they try and escape, which makes sense. Sieges and occupations now, and this might upset some people. Now let's turn to the second part of this talk, where we talk about how sieges work. And we don't wish you a happy Wednesday again. Terrible. First of all, by the way, I think it's like a 5 or 6 week streak now, where we have a Happy Wednesday every week, so they're very consistent with the Happy Wednesdays. Big nice. First of all, there are 2 different types to talk about here, as not all locations are created equal. Locations without any fortifications will not have any long siege, but an army with a single full-strength regiment is enough to take it in a few weeks. But we do see in a few weeks, so this little pseudo short siege, just seizing control rather than sieging for control. Location with some sort of fortifications requires a full siege, though. So we have siege progress here. We see some modifiers. All this is nice as well. Having an offensive societal value is not ideal for your sieges. I suppose that makes sense, because you want to do things in the battlefield rather than in the sieges. So that's interesting, because defensive is maybe going to be good for offensive sieges? Maybe? Okay. Food has a significant impact on how you plan your military campaigns. That makes sense, as it affects how long you can maintain a siege. Most sieges were won by starving an army out. So, if you have a really big army, you probably want to make sure you have a lot of food. That way you can siege stuff down. If you have a small army, by contrast, you probably want to dodge fights and just try and hole up, and if they don't have the food supply, you can force them to try and storm the castle, this type of stuff. Or just leave, because assuming you're not trying to actively win with fewer troops, or like impose your will on them. The key thing here, and this is something I am a big fan of, is that sieges are gambles. This is something that I see people complain about in EU4 all the time, is that they hate that it's a die roll. But also, I think that this is kind of correct. You don't know when a siege fort will fall, and now with the fact that if you run out of food, you will run the risk of actually losing and failing a siege. I think what everyone really gets mad about with sieges, though, is not that they're maybe opaque, and that the fact that you don't know if when a fort will fall is like a factor in a siege, but I think that anytime something's over 50% and it fails multiple times in a row, even though over the course of the campaign you are virtually guaranteed for that to happen, like, so for example, for a 50% shot to fail, 3 times in a row, that'll happen 10 or 12% of the time or whatever it is. You're running more than 10 sieges, eventually you're just going to get unlucky, and it just feels bad because when you have this high percentage, you have this expectation of success, and then when you don't get it, it just like, it's a psychological feels bad. So it's perhaps the case that they should just actually make it opaque what your percentage chances are of succeeding in the siege, where I think it's just psychologically just very frustrating, more so than like people think that sieges, you should know exactly when a siege will end. It's just frustrating to see that you have a percent chance to win the siege, and then you take the tick and the siege doesn't win. About every 30 days, there's a chance for something to happen in a siege, with the chances of it getting worse for the defenders or another month of holding out. And we see here what looks very similar to EU4, which might make people upset, because I do see this complained about all the time. I've never really had a problem with the percentage siege ticks. Obviously, like, when I have a 97% to siege and I fail it twice in a row, I'm annoyed, but also that's like something that happens. I think what made me kind of change my attitude about this was definitely playing poker, where, like, you play, like, tens of thousands of hands or whatever, and over the course of the time, you really get, like, just as a mathematical certainty, you will just really get unlucky sometimes, and it's important to note that, like, that doesn't mean you played wrong, and, like, yeah, just, like, separating correct play from, like, odds of stuff happening, and, like, really having to play a game where you have to evaluate chance and odds a lot, and it's just a very critical part of the game, makes you, I think, feel a little bit different about this type of stuff. I mean, it's still frustrating when it happens, but it's, like, not as frustrating because just because you have an 80% chance to succeed, like, that still means 1 in 5 times you will get bricked, and so you should be emotionally prepared to get bricked a lot. Anyways, with these changes, the assault will now be a more potentially viable option, which I think is good. It didn't feel that good before in EU4. I almost never assaulted, as you either win and save time and food. So this is the critical one. Saving food is kind of the new thing you are saving, or you fail the assault and have taken casualties, thus preserving your supply longer. That is an interesting one for preserving your supply longer, but yeah, it was always like, oh, we're just going to lose a ton of mountain power here, we can afford to wait, so okay, we wait. Although, to be fair, I wasn't exactly killing it in EU4, or as we like to call it, Project Caesar. -1. Okay. While besieging a central location, coastal location, it's not only important to blockade it, making the siege faster, or it's not only important to blockade it, making the siege faster, it could also at the same time supply your army with food. So definitely like seeing how navies can be dynamically important in a way that they were historically, right? And then we have automatic control, which is definitely a feature I'm a huge fan of. And here we go. As the map is more granular than in previous games we have made, warfare would turn into a massive slog to manually siege or occupy every location. Now, while we have automation systems, it would still not be very fun. Wait, what? Now while we have automation systems, it would still not be very fun. Project Caesar has two different ways to automatically gain control over several locations at once. Oh, so they're saying, okay, we're gonna have ways to gain control over multiple locations at once, even yeah, okay. First of all, if you take a fort, all locations in its zone of control will start changing over to you. I think that this is a feature in Imperator, with the exception of forts. This is also valid. This is also valid for forts owned by an enemy if we have taken it. Secondly, if you take their capital, you will start getting control over all locations of the province. Of course, this is blocked by hostile armies and forts. Definitely makes sense. And so, okay, so it's fighting for key locations. Make sure you occupy them, and then you can move on. As mentioned in previous posts on the forum, we have zone of control system in Project Teaser as well, but one with far less complicated rules than what was used in Imperator Rome. As you may have noticed earlier, there is an advance in the Age of Revolutions that allows you to ignore zone of control. While that may be useful to chase down armies, as you will often want to take forts and cities to get your logistics sorted out. Unless you have a huge baggage train, in which case you can kind of dive for armies, right? If you're carrying years and years worth of supplies with you, then zipping in to try and snipe armies is going to be interesting. I wonder how they will treat the cutting of supply lines. I mean, we did see the 2-province thing about getting food somewhere up here, or 2 locations over, that up to 2 locations away. So I wonder if you could even take, like, a unit of cavalry and a baggage train. So like 1 horse archer and this guy, and just try and cut supply lines. Because you will have a ton of supply yourself. The army will be small, so it'll move faster, because they did talk about a movement speed bonus regarding logistics, right? Somewhere up here, they talked about movement of armies in Project Caesar is different. And so army beyond a certain size will be marching slower. So, this might create the ability to create sort of insurgent squads. Insurgent squad's not the right term, because an insurgent, I think your territory has to be occupied for someone to be an insurgent. But the idea is, if you take a cavalry unit and a supply train unit, and you just insert it in the enemy army, and you try and cut their supply lines so that they're not going to be receiving 2 locations deep, wherever they're at, especially if they have a place that's easy to do this, you get like a pseudo encirclement, which will maybe be interesting. We'll see if that's like something you can try and do, and that'll make micro very interesting in like PvP if you're fighting over things like that. I know Hearts of Iron, it's like, I mean, in some sense it's kind of an equivalent to an encirclement, but trying to leverage some advantages in order to make it happen. Okay. Let's see. As mentioned in previous posts, okay, we already went with this. And the last thing is, of course, recruitment options. One thing that has not been mentioned yet is that the military will have different recruitment methods for regiments, where you could either rush training the regiment to be ready much quicker, but at far less strength, or spend more time training and start with higher experience. So this is an interesting little change. You can see here more starting experience, which is going to be nice. Next week we will talk about ships and some aspects of the naval part of the game, which I'm super excited for. Navy, I think, is something that should be reworked in Victoria 3, and so I'm excited to see what they have on offer, because Victoria 3 might get ideas based on like what they're doing or what they're doing internally with the Tinto stuff, and so if there's some good ideas for Navy, or good ideas about how to implement systems, that'll be really nice. And so we will be talking about that next week. I hope you guys enjoyed. We did talk about logistics and sieges, but other than all that, I hope you guys have a happy Wednesday. Bye-bye now.